Okay, everybody here? Live stream running as well? Okay, then thanks for coming at this late time of day. I'm Michael Mrozek, as can be seen here, also known as Evil Dragon in the community. Oh, there's still coming people here. Let's join in. And I want to tell a bit about the Pandora and the Pyra, which will be the successor of the Pandora that's currently in development. And we'll take a quick look at the history and a sneak peek at the future. First, for those who don't know what is the Pandora, just a quick look. Basically, it's a miniature handheld PC, as can be seen here. Completely open, runs Linux. It's basically a mixture between a video gaming system, so we've got D-pad and analog controls, but at the same time it's also a complete miniature PC. Right now I have it here and I'm watching the IRC from our community because the people might have some questions as well, and if they are watching the live stream then I can answer these questions right here. It's always been made to be hacker friendly, so there's no bootloader that you can kill or something like that. It's always recoverable. It's not locked down in any way. You can boot any operating system you want. And of course there's no force for registration or anything like that, so you don't need a Google or anything else account. You can do what you want with it. Basically it's just like a normal PC, just a bit smaller. It was also always very important to have a long battery life. So the Pandora normally has 10 hours of battery life, which is pretty amazing for such a small PC. And one of the most important thing is that it's community driven, which means, well, it's basically, you all know that, the same with Linux all the time. It's a bunch of people working together, and as the world is very big, there are a lot of people working together just to make this work. There's no big company or huge company behind it.
And it's also quite expensive.
Well, quite expensive, that can be seen as you like, but if I look at the current smartphone with the Cortex A15, they are at 800 euros, so they're expensive. And they're even cheaper to build because it's just a flat case and nothing else, and a screen and an SoC. So compared to the big ones, we are pretty cheap actually, because we have to pay a lot more to get the parts than they do, but we basically have the same price.
Yeah, it's expensive compared to other gaming handhelds.
Well, to gaming handhelds, yes, but those gaming handhelds usually fund themselves with sales of games, which is not the case here because here we are running open source games and emulators and ports. Okay, let's just do quick pictures, because if I just hold it in my hand you can see it very well. As said, we've got a D-pad, we've got a keyboard, we've got a few knobs. At the back we've got USB ports, shoulder buttons, TV out port and mini USB. So it's pretty much, as said, a computer combined with a gaming handheld. Now let's just do a quick look at the history of the Pandora. Basically 2007, 3 guys, I was one of them, who were selling the GP2X Linux handheld from Game Park Holdings. Well, we decided to create a new Linux gaming handheld device, and after a while we found a case in the PCB designer in the community, and that's basically how the Pandora was born. Well, yeah, and at first we only thought of it as a gaming device, that it can be a PC basically, or a complete mini laptop. That's something we found out later. The idea basically was we wanted to have a device that could at least emulate an Amiga in full speed, which means we needed to have a system that has a touch screen, a keyboard, and a CPU that's fast enough, and that's basically how the first shape of the Pandora came to be. More ideas have been gathered from the community. We actually made a thread about what would your dream handheld be like, and then we picked everything that would be possible from the thread and included that into the Pandora. Then the developing starts with some valued community members like DJ Willy, Snowdas and Skizix, who were active in the scene before, worked on the operating system and drivers. And then in 2008, that was just 1 year later, we had the first prototypes, but only prototype PCBs. The case was not finished yet. That was really revealed to the public. At that time, a Cortex A8 had impressive CPU power, so we suddenly had a large press coverage. And when we started pre-ordering in September 2008, the plan was to have it released in December 2008, which didn't work, but it was our plan. Over 4,000 orders had been taken within 2 or 3 days because of that, and then we just had to cap it because it would have been an issue producing even more. And well, it was our first try producing a handheld. 2008 to 2009, a lot of issues occurred, mainly with the cases, and which led to a lot of delays. People were waiting, and in 2010, though that was 1.5 years later than planned, the first Pandoras got delivered, but as there still were had issues in the production, it was a very slow delivery, and some even went up on eBay for I think 1,800 euro, simply because it was such a rare device. But the users who got it were still impressed, so they all said it was worth wait. Well, but it wasn't over. We had a lot more delays and issues, which also used up a significant amount of money. And Craig, that was one of the other guys from the first team, decided to sell premium upgrades to deliver Pandoras faster to the customers who already pre-ordered. I wasn't too fond of that, but he was the guy doing basically the organization back then, and it seemed the only way to rescue the Pandora. But it didn't really work because early 2011 more issues occurred and about 1,000 PCBs had been scrapped. So yeah, it was a bit of inexperience, it was a bit of bad luck basically, and probably also a lot of misorganization, and that nearly killed the whole project. Up to then, about 2,700 Pandoras had been delivered, and about 1,200 in theory were outstanding. At the time, Craig decided to give up basically and close the company. But I didn't want to give up and looked for investors, which I found, and decided to move the Pandora production to Germany and have it properly organized, so that it would be a smooth run in the future. Early 2012, the time had come and the production resumed in Germany without any major issues, just a small, few issues you always have when starting a new board production, but it wasn't a big deal. And from then on, the Pandoras were available from stock. That was the first time they were available from stock. Since we still had a lot of pre-orders, the idea was to both deliver them to all the new customers. Basically, the new customers financed the Pandoras for the old customers. There was no other way to get money back into the pot. And even though the hardware was basically outdated back then, the sales were still pretty good. For various reasons. First, it was the only device, or still is the only device, that can do all that. Up until now, there's no mini Linux PC with that size. And thanks to Linux and a very optimized operating system, it runs a lot faster than an Android phone. For example, we've got some emulators like Drastic, the Nintendo DS emulator, and actually it runs faster on my Cortex A8 Pandora than it runs on my Cortex A9 phone. Simply because there's not all that overhead and all that services that are running on Android. Well, in September 2012, the current Pandora, the 1 GHz Pandora with an improved case, had been released. And, well, Craig decided once again to offer pre-orders for the 1 GHz Pandoras, which led to another fiasco, but I don't want to talk too much about Craig and all those fiascos. I'm pretty happy that basically this is all behind us now, except for remaining pre-orders that are still there, but we're working on getting them the Pandoras as well. In January, I had all my pre-orders delivered, so I don't have any debts to them, and about 150 of Craig's customers should have been still outstanding, but in reality it seemed there were about 600 left, which is what we're currently trying to finance and pre-order and with donations, and I'm selling them for production costs. But well, we're getting there. But now in October 2013, the final Pandora batch of about 500 Pandoras have been announced, mainly because the parts are end of life, so it's impossible to get the nubs, it's impossible to get more Wi-Fi modules. The system is now 5 years old, so getting parts will be more and more difficult. So it was time to go to an end of life. And well, end of 2013, the first information have been released that I am working on a successor without Craig. That will be called the Pyra, and well, that's what we will be talking about here from now on. And one thing I can say right now is that every customer from Craig who hasn't received the Pandora until the Pyra will be released, they will be able to get them for production cost price. That's all I can offer, but at least for all the waiting, they can get it for a pretty cheap price. Well, before we're talking about its successor, we had to think about what's good and bad about the Pandora. Pretty good are the great gaming controls. The D-pad is being pretty good. I'm a gamer myself, and all our customers said, well, that's one of the best D-pads they ever had. The buttons are great, the knobs are great when they're working. Yeah, we're getting there on the what's not so good side. The size is great, it's pocketable, I can put it into my pocket and that's it. It's got a full Linux system, which is great. Well, at least for me, I don't want any. Well, anybody here wants to run Windows 8 on a handheld? No? Okay. Well, it's not locked down. You can choose whatever OS you like. And I still like the freedom to don't have any account anywhere and just have a computer which runs my software. That's still something I like, but it seems people now these days are happy to have Google accounts and Windows accounts and link them all together so that you can steal everything at once. Well, what's also good is that it has standard ports like a USB port and the SD card slots. So got a USB stick, got an external hard disk from a friend, just plug it in, copy stuff over, connect the DVD stick and watch TV. Well, it's a mini PC, you can do anything you can do on a big PC. What's also awesome is the community. We've got a very active and friendly community. They're helpful. They're porting and optimizing software and ports. And we also got the P&D system, which is easy to use for newbies, robust and reliable. I know some people don't like it that much, but we also decided to keep it together with a standard operating system for the future because it has some advantages, but I want to get to that later. What's also great, of course, is the battery life, so that's also something we would like to keep. What's not so good is the case quality. It looks a bit cheap and it's not too robust. Sometimes it develops cracks. We have it improved with the current version, but the old version developed a lot of cracks, and that in a pretty fast way. So, but we still want to improve it. Then we had a lot of issues with Asian manufacturers. I don't want to say all Asian manufacturers are bad; they certainly aren't. But mostly the Chinese market focuses on large production runs, so 100,000 devices and more. They don't care about the small customers. And well, there are good manufacturers and there are bad ones, but to find out which one is good and bad would mean you have to visit them all and try to work with them, and that's not just possible for such a small team. So we had some issues there, and that was some problem with the Pandora as well. The analog controls, as I mentioned, sometimes they are inaccurate. When they work, they are great, but then sometimes when you try to move left, say they move left up and stuff like that, so they could be improved.
On Wednesday?
Wednesday?
Only Wednesdays?
Only Wednesdays?
When do they not function?
When do they? Well, I think it depends on, not Wednesdays, but it heavily depends on the knob. So some work always, and some don't work at all, and there's anything in between. So if you got a unit which has great working knobs, you're happy. But we can't test all of them and replace them all of the time because we would have to have a stock of 100,000 knobs or something like that. That's why we need to improve that as well. Well, the screen resolution with 800x480 is a bit too small for Linux programs because many of them expect 800x600. It's not that a big deal because you can move the windows around, but it's a bit annoying, so that could be improved as well. Yeah. That's great. The internal storage these days is a bit small with 512 megabyte, which means we also only have a minimal operating system on there, not a full-fledged one. If you want to use a full one, you can put it onto the SD card, but it would be nice having a full operating system already on the internal storage and then having the SD cards on top of that. Well, the keyboard is hard to use in the dark because you can't see the labels. So even I have the problem typing at the dark sometimes. It feels a bit squishy, but that also depends a bit on the person. Some persons love it. Some persons think it could be improved, but we're going to take a look at them. Well, not so good, some parts are not available to buy anymore, and not so good is the sad story that Craig hurt the community and respected members. It went so far that he even said bad words about some of the members, and well, that was not so nice. I don't want to turn this into Craig bashing because he certainly had a lot off his shoulders, but it has to be said, and it has to be said that he will not be involved in the next device, at least not in my one. Well, what are the goals? Of course, update the hardware to current gen, because the hardware is now 5 years old. Improve all the current issues, the case, synapse, etc. Tight integration with the community, which is always something I always try to do, because I always felt like a community member more than I felt of a producer or something like that. I'm always available at the IRC and at the web boards, and I love following it. And I'm happy that all those people are working together to create one great device. So we also try to be as open as possible. It's not possible in every way, but we're trying to do that as good as we can. And another thing is we want to offer a more standard OS as a main OS. Right now we're running Debian on it, the standard ARM Debian. And we want to put additional optimizations by the community, for example, hardware acceleration and stuff like that, that will be in a different repository. The reason the more standard OS is better, of course, is you can easily compile, you can easily stay up to date, because Debian ARM, for example, has its own repositories. They are always kept up to date, and with the current OS we have libraries that are a few years old, because it's very, very complicated to keep your own operating system always at the latest state. Yes?
Are you arguing for the Debian ARM check?
We haven't decided yet, but I think so, because the package management from Debian is great. There's an ARM port available, and it's also easy to create basically your own distribution with dbootstrap and then put your own repositories with optimizations on. So we haven't fixed it yet, but it looks like it, yes.
I was more about the ARM float port, not ARM general.
Okay. About the
ARM float port.
ArtFloat?
Yeah, ARM HF.
ARM HF, yeah. We want to switch to ARM HF, of course, yeah. Yeah, right, we are not using ARM HF on the Pandora right now, yeah. That's something that will also be optimized. But of course, we want to keep what's good, the gaming controls, the audio output, and the battery life. And we want to improve the hinge as good as possible, but that's something, it's not easy, but we're doing our best. So you could say keep what's good and improve what can be improved. That's basically the idea for the successor. Pretty easy idea, but basically that's what needs to be done. Yep. Now it skipped a few things. Okay. Now let's first start with Dragonbox Pyro, which will be the name. Where does the name come from and what does it mean? First, I didn't want to use Pandora because first I wanted to have a new name to forget the bad things that happened, and also to, well, I'm not sure if Craig would be angry if we call it Pandora because he was involved in it, so I just wanted to have a different new name. The name should be related to the Pandora because during the last years we really had a great community. The Pandora was doing well. So it should be related. It should be easy to remember in short, and not something like, well, just enter Pandora into Google and now you've got Pandora accessories, you've got Pandora radio, you've got the Pandora battery, you've got anything Pandora. So I wanted to have a name which is not yet used that much. So we had suggestions and votings from the community. And well, Pyra was basically what has won, or well, in English you would probably call it Pyra, in German it would be Pyra, don't know in your language. We'll see what the people will call it. And going back to Greek mythology, Pyra, that's a bit different written, but I didn't want to have the name like that because nobody would be able to write that. That's the daughter of the Pandora, which fits as well. So that was the reason for the name. And what will it be like? Well, as said, state-of-the-art CPU, LCD and speakers, new accurate knobs that don't wear out. That's simply because the new knobs are magnets with Hall sensors. We've got them on the dev board. We will be back at the table tomorrow, so anybody who wants to try out the dev board can do so tomorrow, the whole day. We want to have a backlit keyboard, which is also something that I have been missing on the current unit. A robust and better looking cave, improved connectivity, so Wi-Fi will be improved and be state of the art. We are planning to have 3G and UMTS, but only as optional modules, so if you don't want it, simply don't buy it. USB ports and a standard HDMI port, which would also make it possible to design a cradle at home, so you can just put it into your docking station. The docking station is a normal HDMI monitor and the keyboard and mouse attached, and then you have a PC at home, which is also great. Of course, RAM needs to be upgraded. 512 megabyte is nothing these days, and the internal storage as well. And we still want to use an analog audio wheel, because I still hate those buttons which and you never know when you switch your device on, is it off? Sometimes the buttons, you take 1, 2, 3 seconds to react. So an analog audio wheel is what the community wanted and what I still want to keep, because it's simple, turn it left, turn it right, and it works right away without using any CPU power.
I have a question.
Sure.
With 3G, can you also use it as a phone then?
You can in theory use it as a phone, yes. The question is, will it be usable? We have a microphone in there and speakers, so you could talk like that, a bit like the Engage side talking. But you could of course use a headset or a Bluetooth headset, okay. But it would be possible, yes.
No, please. Sorry.
It's useful. It's useful, sure. But I'd rather use it for mobile internet. So let's take a look at the main SoC, the processor. Actually it took us about 1 year to find a proper SoC for that. We had a lot of talks with different manufacturers, but it was always something that we didn't like. NVIDIA, for example, when working with NVIDIA, they told us we have to use their own partner companies to do the design and production, and I don't think with such a niche product and such a low quantity we would have found any company. Samsung didn't want to sell us their SoC because, well, we were below 100,000 or something like that. All the Chinese SoCs have the issues that they either have no Linux drivers or they don't have a hardware documentation or both, which makes it really hard to design a PCB around it. So in the end, we went back to the Texas Instruments OMAP. We had a Texas Instruments before in the Pandora. And I know a lot of people were crying, well, Texas Instruments, they went out of business of that. That's not true. They just went out of the smartphone business. But they're still in automotive and medical business, which was all their main goal before that as well. So the huge advantage is that we can get it in low quantities, because everything that's made for industrial usage can also be gotten in low quantities. Of course, if you have a medical design or if you need for your company a few things, you don't need to buy 100,000 SoCs. So we can buy them, we've got a good documentation, and they have also Linux drivers available for us. So we've got a state-of-the-art Cortex A15, which is what current high-end smartphones have, with up to 1.7 gigahertz each. That's pretty fast. We were running, outside on the table, we were running KDE4 with Battle for Westnorth and I think GIMP, and at the same time 2 PlayStation emulators on one screen, and it worked without any issues in full speed. So. Yeah, he already started again, okay. So if you take a look there, that's just the board. Of course you can play around with it tomorrow outside the table as well. But it's pretty impressive how fast it is. One of the bad things is the Power VR, which is the 3D processor, and it doesn't have any open source drivers available. But well, except for the Mali, I think there's no open source driver for any of those SoC 3D chips available. And the Mali was only in the Samsung chip, I guess, which they didn't want to sell to us, or in slower SoCs, so that didn't have to help. Well, it still has DSP and Neon, and we probably want to go to 2 GB of RAM. More gigabyte would probably just make it more expensive, and on the other side would need more power. And right now, I think when we had a lot of things running at the same time, we were using about 600 megabytes. So I'm not sure if you need more than 2 GB on a mobile device.
Only if you want to compile with mod.
Should work with 2 GB.
In debug mode.
Okay, well, you've got swap. You've got 2 SD card slots that goes up to a few terabytes, so that should be enough for swap.
When are there 4 cores with different architectures? And 4 cores
For power saving, basically. Yeah.
Big little architecture.
Yeah, similar to the Big Little, yeah.
So you use M4 cores for low?
You can do that, yes. Right now, the Cortex A15 cores simply go down so that you don't need that much power, but I'm not sure what we exactly can do with the Cortex M4. We just started with the hardware development. What you see here is without any hardware acceleration yet. It's just a standard Debian, and there's no hardware acceleration chip used yet. It's just running on CPU with software modus. Yeah, but fast enough for that. Then let's go to the LCD. The one we will probably use is a Full HD one 1920 x 1080. That's a bit of an overkill in resolution, I think, but it was impossible to get a lower one. Either you get 800 x 480, which is a bit too low, or you get higher ones because the smartphone business moves on to 4K and Ultra HD on those small screens, whatever. Yes, a question? No, that's probably just because I was typing it to this morning. I'm not sure. No, it can't be interlaced in a display. No, it's P. Yeah, 1080p. Thanks. It's got a fast response time of 20 milliseconds, which is great for an LCD. If you got a Google Nexus 5, it's the same screen, so you can already take a look how well it is. One thing I thought about is that a high resolution could also be used to accurately simulate a CRT monitor. When playing old Super Nintendo or DOS games, you need a lot of lines in between to make blooming effects or something like that. I think that would be possible with that resolution. Somebody needs to code that, but it would surely look awesome.
Should be possible as hardware filter?
Yeah. Otherwise, of course, it's great for viewing videos or pictures. But well, you can also use a half 720p resolution and just upscale it. I don't think you will see too many pixels. But it's interesting. It's not possible to get any 720p displays anymore because the industrial doesn't need that high resolutions and the smartphones need a lot more these days. Things are going crazy. Well, let's go to the gaming controls, LEDs and keyboard. As you can see there on the dev board, we've got a few LEDs already lighting up. That's the backlit. Of course, there you can control them in brightness, switch them on and off with software. That's all in the user space. We will also have some RGB LEDs which can be used for, well, SD cards, or you could use one RGB LED for the battery status, red when it's empty, green when it's full, and something in between if you want to see how much juice there's in the battery left. Of course, you can also use it for email notification. Whatever you want to do, it's in user space, you can code it in. We will also have a D-pad, then 4 shoulder buttons. That was a huge request from many Pandora members. And we will most probably also have 6 face buttons, though we have to check if that can be done in a good way to fit in the space right now. The case company is currently checking that. But it looks like we will have 6 face buttons, which is okay for some fighting games and stuff like that.
Analog thrusters instead of 4 shoulder buttons.
Oh, that's even more complex and complicated. Why do you need them, except for Xbox emulation, which won't be possible?
Yeah, that's
Well, you've got analog controls like the knobs for racing games.
Yes, but between cost use, I can actually use the second one.
Okay. Well, we have to make a limit somehow, and we don't. One thing I always want to do, I don't want to go into anything overly complex, because the more you try to improve it, the more can also go wrong. So we try to improve the important things and keep it simple. When everything works, we can work on the next device and improve even more things. But as a small company where there's no huge financing backing in my back, we have to see where we can. Yeah, okay, I'll make a Kickstarter just for those shoulder buttons. Well, the case will be available for as case design file, so you can design it and print it yourself, if you like. It's a hacker-friendly device. Okay, power button, as said, with the RGB LED, backlit keyboard, and 2 more RGB LEDs right now. This is a quick mock-up I made with the OpenPandora. Ignore the keyboard layout, it's not yet fixed or anything, but you can see we've had the key row will go down so that you can have the numbers like that. You will have the speakers up there, so we have more screen for the more room for the screen, and we have a power button, not a switch anymore, because, well, I don't know why the switch is just not needed at all at the Pandora. It can all be done with a power button. And that's what we want to use. Also, we want to have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, stuff like that buttons. As said, the keyboard layout is not fixed. We want to work on that with the community together. But
hardware switch for the microphone and for.
Well, the microphone is will simply be a digital microphone, and same as on the Pandora, each hardware will be designed so that it can be completely switched off. You don't need a hardware switch for that, but if you can switch it off in software with root, well, of course, it could, in theory, somebody could hack into your Debian and try to switch it on, but I'm not sure if that device will be the top priority for hackers.
For the
Well, maybe, but I'm not sure about that. We have a microphone in the Pandora as well, and I think nobody tried to hack into it.
You at least don't know about those.
Yeah. Yes.
Attach a LED to it that when it's activated hardware, always the LED is on.
Well, yeah, that would be possible. Something to think about, but yeah, sure. Stuff like that is what always improves all those ideas. Okay, let's go to connectivity. Wi-Fi will be improved. We haven't yet decided on the chip, but it will probably be 802.11a BGN. Maybe only BGN, because A is not really used widely anymore, but you will have 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz available. It will have Bluetooth, not yet 100% sure if 3.0 or 4.0. As mentioned, optional UMTS 3G and GPS, because that's built into the UMTS module as well. So you could use it for navigation, for quick web surfing outside. You could use it as a phone, as mentioned. HDMI out, so you can connect it to standard flat screens, which is great like that. Go at home, connect it to your monitor, use it as a PC. It will have a full USB host port with a hub included, which is, I'm mentioning that because the Pandora doesn't have a hub in, so you can only use pure USB 2.0 device. If you try to connect the USB 1.1 device, it will simply crash. You need a hub in there. That has to be changed, and that will be changed. We will have a micro USB port on the go as well, 2 SDXC card slots, and a headset port. So nothing much has changed from the Pandora. It just have been improved. The components will be more recent. The battery, which was also a lot of discussion about, the battery will be the same as the Pandora for various reasons. First, batteries can only be really bought in China. And our current distributor and manufacturer is reliable. So we bought them from them within the last years, and he was always fast, reliable. We had no issues with them, and we don't want to try anything and choose another one and then have another Chinese company with issues. So the batteries will be the same. We also talked to him, and he said the only way to improve the capacity right now with the current technology would be to improve the battery size, but then again we had to improve the case or the size of the Pyra, and we didn't want that. Yes?
Did you want to move over to light body batteries?
Which one? No?
Then light body batteries.
Yeah.
What you said it has missile batteries.
Okay. Did I? No. I haven't said anything about the type of battery.
Same type.
Same type, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay. Not just the same type, but the same battery. And well, the case will be improved because the current case we had to put some bumpers in there so that the battery will fit properly. That will be improved so that it will fit right from the beginning. And one advantage is still if there are people who have a Pandora and don't want to upgrade to a Pyro or anything like that, they don't have to fear that they won't get batteries in the future because it will be the same battery. So we will have them on stock. Well, and if you got a Pandora and a Pyro, you can use both batteries for both systems, which is always great as well. Well, the battery life, that's pretty hard to say right now because we have our dev board is currently connected to the official TI OMAP EVM. But it should be approximately the same. The components, the standard components like Wi-Fi and the LCD use the same power, and the performance per watt is a bit lower, is better on the current systems, on SoCs. So when doing the same task, it should use a bit less battery than the Pandora. And of course, when doing high rendering stuff, running two PlayStation emulators or something like that, then you need a lot more battery than on the Pandora, that's for sure. But for mostly daily work and web browsing and stuff like that, it should be about the same as the Pandora, which is about 10 hours right now. Standby time a lot more, listening to MP3s also a lot more, but normal work time is about 10 hours. Let's come to the case. One of the huge issues we still had with the Pandora, because it doesn't look like a 500 euro device. It looks like a 50 euro device, and that was a bit of a problem sometimes. The case will be completely redesigned and produced by a company in Europe, Form Action in Greece. And there's one advantage that the same company, that one company is both doing the design and the production. First, the designer knows the specification and tolerances of the machine, so he knows exactly what he can design and what will work. That was a huge issue when we did the case for the Pandora, because the designer was sitting in USA and the case company was in China, and then he sent them some designs, then they had cracks in there, they had shrinking marks and anything. Well, and then the issue was, the designer was, it was the fault of the manufacturer, and the manufacturer said it was the fault of the designer. Well, two people or one company and one person, and one blaming each other. I have no idea who's wrong, who's right. But if I have it in the same company, they can't say that, because they have to take care that the design is properly. We also have a faster turnaround times, because I can call them up, I say we need these and these changes, the designer can do the change, then he goes 20 meters further and just produces a new prototype case, and then we have it within a short time frame. With the Pandora, I think we had about 4 to 5 weeks for just small changes, which led to a lot of delays, so it's good that we don't have this issue anymore. Communication is also easier. I don't have to speak Chinese. And our contact partner there speaks German fluently and English as well, so there's no language barrier. And the distance is also no issue. I was there in Greece last weekend, and we had with the hardware designer of the PCB, and then we discussed different details, etc. And going to China with all those customs and stuff like that is also an issue. So in the end, we will have a high quality of the case.
Question about the case.
Yes.
How far are you there already with the port size and stuff like this? Like you mentioned HDMI port.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of HDMI port do you mean? Full size?
No, micro. You can put a full size on the back.
Yeah.
We don't have that much space. Well, basically what they did is they first made a copy basically of the Pandora design, just with already improvements that it looks better and that it doesn't have any shrinking marks. And from there on, they are improving the case with every board revision they get. So we always send them the latest revision, and they change it.
Are they also working on improving the ergonomics a little?
Yes.
Because right now when holding the Pandora for some hours,
Yes.
you will have marks in your
Yeah,
hands.
exactly. Well, if you hold it and use the shoulder buttons. If you don't use the shoulder buttons, it work. But if you use the shoulder buttons, then you have marks on your hands. Yeah, but that is something I've spoken with them as well. Yeah, so we are closely working together. I'm having contact with them once or twice a week already, and which is way better than with the Chinese company. We had contact. Well, we had a question, got an answer 4 weeks later, I think. So that's already a huge improvement, and well, I can't tell when the case will be finished because it all depends. We're still looking into the hinge because that will be the most complex part to design. We're also looking into the key mat design because such a key mat is not easy to produce. So we're looking for companies there, and of course, as long as the PCB isn't finished, they can finish the case design. But that's happening at the same time. So the designer of the PCB and of the case both working together closely, so that we don't have to wait until the PCB is finished before they start designing the case.
How problematic is the specification of the CPU? As far as I know, those A15 ones can produce a lot of heat.
Yep.
And seeing that in the current design of the current Pandora, the position of the chip is pretty close to the battery. The batteries really love heat. Do you already have a plan how to handle the amount of heat?
Yes, we have different plans there. First, as you can see on the EVM, the processor has heat sink on it, which we will also do. We have a company who is specifically doing a wide area heat sink so that the heat will be will be shared around the area. And I think the battery is suited to go up to 50 degrees or something like that, 40 or 50 degrees. And I made already some measurements. On a full load, we won't get more out of the CPU as 70 degrees, but that's without heatsink. So right now 70 degrees seems to be the maximum, maybe a bit more when the GPU is still active. So with a heatsink that basically goes over the whole backside, there will be a lot less, and then there's plastic in between as well, which can also have some metal inlay if we want. So we're trying to do that.
70 degrees are with no heatsink or with that one?
But please?
70 degrees are without heatsink or with that heatsink?
Without. It has an internal temperature measurement. If with the heatsink, it goes up to I think about 55 degrees. With that one.
Motherboard gets much more heat for throttling.
Could be, yeah.
105.
Okay. No, so 74 was the maximum we had right now. Well, what you can also do is you could cap it because the CPU has a temperature sensor in there. So you could simply lower the CPU power when it goes too high. But that's not our favorite way we want to do. But if in case it really gets too high, we could do that as a worst case scenario because usually it doesn't get that hot. Maybe when compiling Resnode, yeah, for hours.
It takes hours.
Yeah, I know. Well, production will happen at a reliable company, of course. Production and assembly will happen at Global Components in Germany, which is the same company that has been producing the Pandora for years now, without any issues. They're fast, flexible, and reliable. And another advantage is that they're just a couple of minutes away from the PCB designer. Who that will be, well, the team will follow soon. Something about the operating system, I mentioned it already. It will probably be based on Debian ARM. Right now we are having the unstable distribution running without any major issues. There will be a repository for optimized Pyra packages, for example SDL with hardware acceleration and stuff like that. Maybe we will also recompile some of the most important packages because Debian has the problem that they are compiling with thumb, which makes smaller binaries but a slower system. And we probably want that the base system is fast. And well, LibreOffice or stuff like that, I'm not sure if thumb makes a huge difference, but at least for the basic base system, we want to see that it will be as fast as possible.
Well, for the US, what's the plan with the kernel changes? In the old Pandora, there was quite a problem that the changes were kept in an own repository, and it was difficult to get to a more recent kernel release.
Well,
Not just because of Power VR, but
yeah, well, the problem with the kernel is that a lot of things of OMIP-related things have been thrown out of the mainline and they don't accept it.
okay.
So if you want an OMIP kernel, you can go mainline, basically. I'm not sure how exactly that is right now. I just know from the old OMIP 3, I think Notas mentioned that there have been quite a bit of things removed. So we don't know how that will work out. Notas always tries to get the things into the mainline kernel. But there will always probably be some optimizations that can't go mainline. But we will have, of course, our kernel kit as well. But we're trying to, well, right now it's not running a really optimized kernel. It's just a standard kernel that has a few configuration options enabled in there. And we're trying to stay as standard as possible. But we will have our own grid probably again.
And can you please make sure that the two knobs are seen as one gamepad device, not as separate joysticks?
Well, that's something we can tell Notas, yes.
Please do so.
Well, should be possible now because we don't even have. Well, the knobs have changed. They don't have their own Atmel drivers. They're just basically I2C devices. So you can do anything with them if you like.
Good.
Good. The P&D system is met, or as I mentioned before, or something similar will be kept as well. Simply because of the reason it's easy for handling large games and packages on your SD cards. For example, stuff like Jedi Knights or emulators with ROMs or something like that. I'm happy to have that on my SD card. I can remove the SD card, put it into another system and use it there. And you don't have any data loss of games, game data, save data or anything else when you have a system crash. If the internal memory crashes for some reason, shouldn't happen, but always can happen, and you can't boot the system, it's easy to refresh the operating system, but it's probably a bit more complicated to rescue any data saves you have, and when you got that on your SD card, which you can easily back up with your PC, that's a lot easier. It's also pretty easy for the developers to upload it into the repository. We've got our own repository, which can automatically update the packages and stuff like that. And you don't have to open up your own Debian repository. There's just one website and you just create your account, upload it, and then you've got the P&D ready for anyone. The cards can, as mentioned, simply be put into a different system. So if I just remove my card from my Pandora and put it into this Pandora, then I have all my games, saves, and programs as well. So if you ever have to send in the system for a repair, just remove your SD card, put it into the new system, you've got all your stuff. Of course, things like Firefox, web browsers, email clients, and LibreOffice can be installed using the standard Debian repository. But everyone knows Debian is not a famous gaming system. So while there are quite a few games in Debian, we have a lot more games for the Pandora available that are in the repository. And so we want to keep that the same. You have the Debian repository for all your standard programs you want to use, like GIMP. It will be kept updated. And you've got the P&D system for the games that can be handled as on the Pandora. Well, what can you expect power-wise? We have tests running on the current dev board. It runs full KDE4 without any issues. That doesn't mean you have to run KDE4. You can, of course, run OpenBox, LXDE, whatever you like, what's in the Debian repositories. Right now, I simply have LXDE, XFCE4, and KDE4 running. So you can simply select what you want. GIMP runs fluently and smooth, so even filters are just a couple of seconds with large pictures. It does multitasking without issues and is staying responsive. We've got 2 PlayStation emulators running at the same time in an operating system. I think that shows what we can expect in the future, because that's all done without any hardware acceleration right now. Well, based on the experience with the Pandora does full-speed emulation up to PSX with Amiga and DOSBox, and is up to a slow Pentium, basically. The Pandora runs a few PSP emulated titles in full speed, many DS games already, some in 64 titles, and, well, most Dreamcast titles near full speed, so I think 3/4, something like that, 75%. So the Pyro should easily be able to emulate all these in full speed, and of course you have a snappier desktop experience. Yes, a question?
You're saying that Pandora runs a couple of Nintendo DS games, but how does it do that when it is only at one screen?
Well, the resolution is high enough to have both screens on the same. or you've got a TV out cable where you can use your TV as second screen and the Pandora as first screen, which is pretty amazing because I was playing Okamiden with my girlfriend, for example. She was watching the screen and I just had the map on my Pandora screen. That works pretty well. So it is possible. Let's go to the team. Well, that's me, one of the founding members of the OpenPandora. Originally, my job was taking care of the Pandora community, but since 2012, as mentioned, I took over and managed everything that had to do with the Pandora, and since then we had a smooth run. So I'm pretty much experienced now with manufacturing and production. Then the hardware designer will be Nikolaus Schaller. Not Michael Weston anymore, simply because the reason Michael has a full-time job now and also has a family to take care of. So I asked him, but he already mentioned he doesn't have too much time, so we had to stick with another one. But you might know Nikolaus Schaller because he was the one who designed the GTA 04, or currently the Neo 900, so he's experienced with OMAP designs as well. He's doing this for years, has worked for Siemens and is now running his own company. And he's experienced with hardware designs and Linux. And well, one of the good things is he's living in the same place where the manufacturing company is. So whenever there's a prototype run, he just goes over and can debug right away and check if there's a hardware fault or a software fault or whatever. He's also the one who helped me a bit with moving the Pandora production over to Germany. He suggested to use Global Components. He helped me a bit with the prototype run to find some errors. So he's the one doing the hardware right now. And of course, Gražvydas Ignotas, I hope I spoke that name correctly. Also known as Notas. If anybody owns a Pandora, I don't think I need to tell anything about Notas. He was already helping to debug the Pandora hardware from the very beginning with dev boards. He improved and optimized all the drivers, the kernel and a lot of software for the Pandora, for example, the PlayStation emulator or Pico Drive. And he's a long-time respected member of the community. I'm pretty happy to have him back in the team, or still in the team, because he's really doing a great job with all those optimizations. Then we still have Fatih Kilic. Some might remember him from the Pandora. He's also one of the founding members, even though he has not been active in the community during the last years. But he was still helping me sourcing all the various parts. He's experienced with Asian companies and sourcing parts from and manufacturers. As mentioned, we try to do as much as possible in Europe, but some things like batteries or carry cases, AC adapters, just are best to be bought in China. Simply, if you go to a European company and want to order AC adapters, all that we do is simply order them from China as well. Then there are other community members like Skizik, Sep3, DJ Willis, PDSep, Lunixbox, and various others who helped with the Pandora before, and they also said they want to help with the Pyra as well when they have the time. How does it look with financing the device? Well, to fund the develop and manufacture the device up to the final prototype already exists. So that sentence doesn't make any sense, I think, but what I wanted to say is that we've got enough money already up to the stage to the final prototype. So the full design process is already funded. We won't need any money before the device is really working and has a proper case. Then only the mass production run needs to be financed. There are various options to do that, like pre-orders, Kickstarter, bank loan, investments, etc. We will take a look at that as soon as we've got the time. Okay, I'm trying to hurry. And of course, donations are always welcome. You can check the homepage for more information, or buying Pandoras and other stuff from my shop. That's www.dragonbox.de also helps here. Everything goes back into the Pandora, into the Pyra. When will it be available? Well, we made that mistake with the Pandora and said it will be available end of December. This time I won't say anything, no specific date. But you can follow the development blog. The homepage has now been opened. And I will post regularly on the blog what's happening, and you can think about yourself, well, it couldn't be that long now, but I won't give you any dates. So if you want a portable Linux device right now, maybe get a Pandora and wait for the Pyra. If you've got a lot of time, you can wait for the Pyra, but, well, we've got limited stocks. I think that's just the last page. Other more less important tidbits: the schematics and case design files this time will be made public. So if you want to hack around in the hardware, you've got the design files for that. If you want to design your own case or change anything in the case, you can simply print it out and change it. A huge community already exists from the Pandora, so we've got a lot of developers right from the start. We'll try to get it as much backwards compatible as possible and try to produce as little as possible in Asia, simply because we don't have the manpower to control them all. Well, what can you do? Support us, spread the word, join the community, buy Pandoras. Thanks a lot for your support.
2 short questions.
Yes?
1, do you already know how much memory you want to include as NAND?
No.
2, what do you plan for charging? Do you plan to go the micro USB?
Yeah, micro USB.
Okay.
That's the normal standard these days. Yeah, exactly. Well, if you want to visit the developers blog, that's open.pyrohandheld.com. The website has been opened. Well, the time flew. We didn't have that much time for questions. But if you want, you can come to the table tomorrow. You can go to the boards and ask questions, and they will be replied to. Okay, thanks a lot.